how is it for you being in Las Vegas? You're dealing with this now because, I mean, it's just...
Oh, I mean, there's two things, right? One is this is the Wild West, and you don't have to go very far out of civilization to find it. Where I can do what I want, and nobody's going to tell me anything, and it's all a government plot, and okay, fine.
Yeah.
But the other thing is you got to remember, this is an entire city based on people making bad decisions. Right? If people were smart and did what was good for them, this town would not exist.
Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome to Doing It. I'm Will Conlon. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. It's the second one back after a very long break. And again, I have a guest on that I wouldn't have been able to speak to if I was still doing it the way I was before. But now that I moved to the Zoom technology, I'm able to speak to Wayne Turmel, who is an author living in Las Vegas and a former 20-year stand-up comic from Canada. We never knew each other because he quit doing stand-up about a year before I started doing it, but we have a lot of the same friends in common. He knows a lot of the comics that have been on this podcast, and so we sort of just connected through social media that way. And I've always wanted to talk to him because I find his story fascinating. Like he left doing something that he really loved to do, and fortunately still has something that he really loves to do, but his whole journey is very interesting, and he's got some amazing advice and stories about that whole process and about creativity in general and a life as a creator in general. So that's coming up shortly. I do want to say that this interview was recorded roughly 2 weeks ago, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So a lot of the stuff that's gone on in the last week and a half hadn't happened yet. So if you're wondering why we don't touch on that, that's it. It just hadn't happened yet. I don't know. I'm not saying we would have touched on that. I mean, really, the whole point of the talk was about him and his process and his journey and everything else. But that being said, I didn't want it to seem like we're insensitive to what's going on around us, and both with the pandemic and with the absolutely atrocious, horrible racial injustices that have been happening in both Canada and the U.S. And I just want to say it's a really tough thing to talk about, because not because it's hard to form an opinion, but it's just hard to really, it's just such a heavy thing, and it's really it personally is just hard for me to understand how this is still happening, how people can still behave this way. It's staggering to me, and it's a very real thing for a lot of Canadians and Americans. And I just want you to know I support you, and I hope that there's some peace found very, very soon for everybody that's suffering. But so I just wanted you to know that that's why that never comes up in the conversation at all. But you know, there's a lot of really good stuff in this talk, and I was very lucky that Wayne was able to make the time. He's a very busy man with a lot of projects and a lot of people that want to talk to him, and rightfully so, and you're about to see why. So everyone, here's my talk with Mr. Wayne Turmel. Hello.
Hey, sir. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. It's another day in paradise.
Right? You look all cozy and comfortable.
You know, I work from home. This is business clothes in my world. So
yeah, well, because you and I have never met. We I did stand up, but I was after
right. You were post me.
Post you. I think I just missed you, because you stopped doing stand up what year?
I moved to LA in '91, and then I hung it up for good in '96. May of '96 was my very last. May 4th, 1996 was my very last gig.
Okay, and I started in 1997.
Okay.
So there you go. Missed you by 1 year. But we know a lot of the same people.
Oh, yeah.
But when did you start?
I started in Vancouver in 1979.
Right.
So I was one of the first wave of Vancouver comics, and then when I moved to Toronto, I was part of the second generation of Yucks comics.
Yeah, because there's still a lot that I've like Steve Brinder. He was one of the first ones, right?
Well, if you think about the first wave, Mike McDonald, Larry Horowitz, Steve Brinder, Evan Carter, that generation of folks.
Yeah.
I was the first wave in Vancouver was like myself and Ryan Stiles and Roger Chandler and
wow.
Colin and like that. And then I moved to Toronto, and I can never quite be sure when I did. I think it was 83.
Okay.
Because I got out of college and I kicked around for a few more months in Vancouver because I was doing Western Canada and then sliding down and playing Seattle and stuff. And
Okay.
I was in the 1983 Seattle Comedy Competition. So I know I was still on the West Coast in 83. But I think it was 83 I moved to Toronto.
Oh, wow.
And then I was part of the kind of second wave that was Kenny and Glenn Foster and John Wing and me and, that generation of folks.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
there was like, there was the headline guys, and then there were guys like Rakoff and Nemitz and who else would fit in there?
Fleming?
Fleming was kind of old guard because Fleming had been doing other stuff before he came to Yucks. So Fleming, I would consider him, while he wasn't part of Yucks back then, I'd consider him part of the first wave.
Okay. Yeah.
Because he was already working when Kenny and I were trying to make our bones, right?
So 1979 is when you started stand-up. Okay. Give me an idea. I was born, sorry to say this to you, I was born in 1975. I love you, man. I love you already. But so I'm trying to get an idea, a grasp of what comedy was like because
I'll tell you exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I had graduated from high school in 79 and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And then earlier that year or the year before, Rich Elwood in Vancouver heard what was going on at Yuck Yucks. Yuck Yucks started in a community center basement, and they eventually became their own club. Punchlines started in the basement of the Queen Elizabeth Theater, and my first open mic was the opening night of Punchlines in Gastown.
Wow.
When they opened the club. So I am literally as old as the comedy club scene in the city of Vancouver. That was my first open mic, was like September of 79.
How'd it go? Do you remember?
Surprisingly well, which of course, as we all know, is the kiss of death, because then I died for the next, umpteen weeks. But it was, it was Ryan Stiles and Roger Chandler and some people who were kind of in the Vancouver scene. And we, fought for spots, and there was a headliner and there was a whatever. But we were fighting for spots, and paid gigs weren't a gleam in anybody's eye. It was probably a year later that some club owners would have a one-nighter here, or a couple of guys on Vancouver Island said, "Hey, we've got some dates over here. Can you send us some comics?"
Yeah.
So we started to get gigs, and it mirrors the comedy scene everywhere else. If you look at the there's a great documentary about the Boston comedy scene, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was the same thing, right? It started, there were like two, one of them was in a Chinese restaurant and the other one was somewhere else. And that's where everybody started doing amateur nights. And then they started getting gigs here and there. And it was the same thing going on in Toronto. Yucks opened its first club, and, somebody would headline and people would sign up for spots, and you'd, drop kick your brother to get that spot on a Tuesday. And, it started, New York and LA started in the early 70s with the Comedy Store and the Improv in New York and stuff like that. So all of a sudden there was this boom in like 1979 where every city of any size had an empty room with a brick wall, and they started a comedy club.
Wow.
And it kind of was spontaneous combustion, because all of a sudden there was a scene in Seattle and there was a scene in San Francisco And, you know, certain cities had a scene, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Calgary didn't have a scene. I mean, the only two, well, Montreal had a scene because there were some good people coming out of Montreal, Vaudry and Bus Gang and some people like that. There was a little scene in Montreal. There was a scene in Toronto. There was a scene in Vancouver. And that was really it.
So knowing that though, like, cause you're starting out, you're a teenager. How old were you when you started?
I was just turned 18.
Just turned 18. Wow.
Just turned 18. So I was working underage in Vancouver, and then I started sliding down and working underage and illegally in Seattle because I, you know, had phones back in the day. And yeah, we were working. I mean, you know, I'm 18 years old. I'm working the strip club, the Drake.
Yeah.
In Vancouver, you know. I basically put myself through college. Got my 2 years associate's degree, BCIT, Go Cougars, you know, doing stand-up.
Is that right? Well, how quickly were you getting paid as a stand-up then?
Well, probably about a year. After about a year, I got my first opening spot. I went to Victoria. There was a disco in Victoria that I was like the opening act for, I want to say, Roger and Colin, maybe. And, you know, I went and I did my thing and I did sort of okay. And they decided they wouldn't totally ban me forever. And that was kind of the start of it. You know, there was a gig here, a gig there. Like I say, I'd slide down to Seattle and, you know, do a spot. I started, and I was getting a lot of stage time because I would be on 2-3 nights a week at Punchlines.
Really?
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Well, we had 5 nights a week we needed to fill, and, you know, there's only so many comics, right?
Well, and it's kind of weird because it's kind of the reverse now. There is so many comics. Yeah. And you would think that, oh, well, there's got to be more places to perform now, but it almost, I mean, so many politics have come into it too. If you perform there, we won't have you here, all this sort of crap. Right?
What happened is there was nothing, and then there was this huge boom. And with my usual timing, about the time I landed in LA in 91, the boom ended like overnight.
Yeah.
What happened was there were A rooms, B rooms, and C rooms, right? The C rooms were the one-nighters, the horrible disco gigs where you'd show up and, you know, maybe it was good, maybe it was a nightmare, but they were gigs, right?
Yeah.
And then there was the B rooms in most cities. Like if you went to Cleveland, the Cleveland Improv was an A room, but Chuckles was a B room.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And you could headline, this is how I made my living for years when I first went to the States, is you could headline the B rooms with no television exposure.
Oh.
If you were going to play the Improv or, you know, any of the A rooms, you had to have TV exposure. Okay. But if you're playing Penguins in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that was cool. As long as you had a good tape where they'd seen you before, or the booker trusted you. And so there was a whole infrastructure, there was a whole industry of people who booked these kind of B rooms. There were John Yoder out of Michigan and guys out of, you know, Sioux City, Iowa, who were booking the Dakotas and all these one-nighters in these flyover states. And you could make a living for a while. Now, you couldn't stay home. You know, when I moved to LA, I was on the road probably 35 weeks a year. But
Did you have a family at the time? Like when?
Well, no. See, therein lies the rub, right? I had in late '89, my first marriage ended, and my wife got custody of Canada. So I made plans to leave. And so I moved to LA in 91 and moved in. I was Tim Conlon's roommate for
no way.
Quite a while. Yeah. And
relation.
Almost immediately did what I swore I would never do, which is meet an actress and marry her. You know, most relationships do not have room for two neurotic, creative people.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard enough. It's hard enough with one civilian, to make it work. But I was.
But you knew this already before you were just like, no.
And so, I met Joan and we were engaged, not engaged, but we were together. And then my H-1 visa and her pregnancy test, one expired and one showed up.
Wow.
And I said, well, I guess I'm here for the duration, huh?
Wow. That's amazing.
And, I hung in until I literally couldn't anymore. We hung on for a couple more years, and then I was on the road all the time. She was holding down the fort. And then the bottom fell out of the business. And where this all started is I was talking about A rooms and B rooms. The B rooms disappeared. There was no more road work.
Oh, wow.
Unless you had TV exposure. Well, how do you get TV exposure? You have to stay in LA and work for nothing at the Comedy Store and the Improv and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that you get seen by the casting people. And when I moved to LA, I committed the mortal sin of making a living doing stand-up, which meant I was never in LA.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And then with a wife and a child, I wasn't going to hang out at the Comedy Store till 1 a.m. looking for a spot.
Did you ever have aspirations to do television, whether it's in acting
of course.
or yeah?
So, of course I did.
So
that's why I was there, right? Primarily, and I knew very early on because I'm a terrible actor. I did my evening at the Improv spot, and it went stupendously, stupidly well, which kind of carried me for about 1.5 years on pure momentum. Really what I wanted to do was write. And I had a couple of screenplays get optioned, nothing got made. I was the king of close calls in LA. I had more almosts than almost anybody I know. And eventually the time came when the bills were this high and the money was this high and the kid had to eat, and a man's got to do what a man's got to do. And so I first came off the road and just picked up gigs where I could pick them up starting in about 93, 94 while I worked day jobs.
Yeah.
Which were the first day jobs I had since like 1982.
What kind of day jobs were you doing?
I sold cars.
Okay.
I telemarketed copier supplies. I sold videos on the phone for about 48 hours. And that was it until all that time I was looking for a real career. What could I do? And I started getting kind of sucked into the corporate training business. And once I got my first full-time big boy training job, I knew that I couldn't do that and stand up. That if this was going to be a career, I really had to pay attention to it. And that's why I know the date of my last gig, because I was headlining at this horrible club in Simi Valley, California, that was an abandoned gas station that they had decorated to look like Gilligan's Island.
Okay.
I swear. And this guy thought I was fabulous. And I remember I headlined on the Saturday night and I said, this is the last you're going to see of me. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, I've got to hang it up. I've got a day job and responsibilities and this is it. And he didn't believe me.
Yeah, I don't blame him. I mean, you've been at it at that point for almost 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a point in definitely every stand-up's career, for sure. But almost every artist, every actor I know, where they go, I got to quit this. I got to quit this. And how many of them actually do, and how many of them actually just keep saying that and then keep coming back to it, right?
Well, some of it, I'm pretty lucky in that I was able to kind of go on methadone and withdraw slowly by first getting off the road, then doing gigs, then having a gig to go to.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I was able to make the transition kind of smoothly. And, people ask me all the time, do you miss it? There are tons of things I miss about it. I don't miss the business.
Oh, yeah.
I don't miss the politics. I mean, I look on Facebook. I'm still connected to the same people on Facebook that you are, man.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I'm looking, what is it, 28 years I've been down here.
Yeah.
It's the same club owners fighting with the same nonsense. Guys my age who are fabulous acts can't get work. And they're fighting for the same money we were working for
in the
25
late
years
90s.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just like, I do not miss that.
No, I mean, and especially like looking back now, as you said, to see all that and go, God, did I dodge a bullet?
You know,
Right.
I talked to Kenny Robinson on the regular because he's my boy.
Yeah.
And I just, God love him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he just keeps swinging for the fences. It's like he's a better man than me. Now, to be fair, I have a creative outlet. I am a very, very lucky guy. But man, I just couldn't do that. Now, do I miss sitting in a hotel room in Calgary, giggling at 3 a.m. and, you know,
Yeah.
hanging out?
Eating Chinese food at 2:30
Oh, man,
a.m.
I used to stop by
yeah.
Kenny's apartment at 2 every afternoon because he had WGN out of Chicago, and we'd sit and watch the Cubs all afternoon.
Oh, nice.
You know, them were the days, man.
Well, this is the thing I found too. It's so funny the experiences with stand up. It's like it's amazing how with stand up I found it was a lot of it was getting on stage, telling the jokes, the creativity behind it's great. Yeah. But I mean the camaraderie, if you can get it, because not every comic can get it. It depends on how big your ego is, I think, really. And but the camaraderie that you can get with other comics and kind of get that sort of I don't know, friendship or whatever it is that you were sort of missing from your family or your friends that weren't really into the same things as you, and you kind of find that in stand-up.
It's like any creative force, though. There are actors who have a family of actors. Yeah. And you love each other and you hang out together and you enjoy each other and you push each other. And there are probably actors that you hate. Right? Like if you see them at an audition, you can't sit far enough in the other side of the room. And that camaraderie, that sense of, I know it's like that with writers. It's like that with visual artists. Some people create a tribe around themselves. Mm-hmm. And some people isolate themselves. And it's kind of how you want to make that happen. Now, if I were smarter, I'd have chosen better the tribe I had. I might have been able to get further in the business. Unfortunately, I made the habit of hanging out with people I liked. Yeah. As opposed to people that could do me some good.
I know exactly what you're talking about. There's those people in the business that, they might be able to take you further, but they're also the ones that'll probably backstab you at the first chance they can. I mean, it is an ugly business, and it's very, very, very difficult.
But it's a business, and that's what most people never figured out. Yeah. The reason that the reason I got as far as I did with the act I had was that I always treated it like a business. Every time I hit that stage, I was at work. And you treated it like being at work, and you treated the club owners as you would a customer, as a client. And that's why, while there were club owners who were my friends and wild supporters, Donnie Coy in Hamilton was the first one when I moved to Toronto. He went to bat. I mean, he threatened not to hire any more Yucks comics until they headlined.
Wow.
Which nobody else was willing to do.
Yeah.
Jeez. So Donnie was my champion. The people that could actually do something, Mark Breslin, the agents at Yuck Yucks, whatever, were good to me. We were professional and all that. They never really got me, and I never really hung out with them.
Yeah. But you find that everywhere. There's the people that do treat it like a business and treat it like they're doing this and they're putting everything they have into it. And then they're the ones that are just kind of floating by and treating that like big things are going to happen for me if I just show up and
some people can get by on talent.
Yeah.
You
got talent, obviously.
I look at I had talent. I was good, but I wasn't great. I was another white guy in a sweater standing in front of a brick wall at a time when 90% of comics were white guys in sweaters standing in front of brick walls. Yeah. I mean, I was headlining in Ottawa on Norm Macdonald's third amateur.
Wow.
And Norm came up, and I just went, you know? Yeah. I mean, Russell Peters was doing amateur nights when I left. I kind of sort of knew who he was.
Yeah. And you're just like, I can't do
you
it
know,
with these
I was good. I was solid. It's funny, some friends, my evening at the Improv is now available on Amazon, actually.
Oh, wow.
And some friends of mine, and it's the only tape that exists anywhere on the internet. Don't Wayne, look it up now.
So you knew you were talented. You knew that you could do, you know. But then you see these guys like Norm Macdonald, Russell Peters.
Yeah, I mean, club owners would hire me because they could trust me.
Yeah.
I could, on a good night, I could tear up a room.
Yeah.
But nobody was leaving going, holy cow, we got to see that Wayne Turmel guy again.
And you recognize that, so it wasn't that hard for you when it came time to make that decision to hang it up. That played into it, where it's like, well, I'm not going to be a superstar. Was that part of it?
Yeah, what it came down to, Will, honestly, is I have always been blessed, or cursed, if you want to call it that, with a pretty good sense of self-awareness.
Okay. Yeah.
I knew what I was good at. I knew what I wasn't good at. And I had a healthy understanding of how the business worked. And I was the king of close chances. I came so many times to signing management deals. And, you know, I had 2 screenplays optioned, but I couldn't get an agent. I had all this stuff, right? Just so close.
I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure you have.
Yeah.
And after a while, and my wife, who had been a successful actress, if you want to call it that, you wouldn't know who she is, but she had done commercials and sitcoms and all that stuff for years. And, you know, our daughter was a SAG baby, right? My wife is in the top 7% of actresses that year who qualified for health insurance. Oh, wow. Right? So she was
doing
good.
Well. Yeah.
She was good. And the minute she had the baby, she never worked again.
Why? Really, by her choice or by
partly her choice? It was 2 things. One is she made the mistake of telling her agent that she was 40.
Oh, wow.
Because her agent wanted to put our baby in commercials 3 weeks after she was born. And we both said, no and hell no, kids don't work. We are not putting our kid in the business.
Okay.
But the second thing, I remember she told me this story, and this is her story to tell, not mine, but she went to an audition for a commercial, and she'd been on a run, man. She'd been paying our bills. The first 2 years we were married, she was paying the rent with her commercial work.
Yeah.
And she was in an audition, and there was Christina Pickles and somebody else, and like all these actresses that she knew. And these actresses that she knew and respected and worked and had resumes were sitting in the corner, clutching their sides, muttering to themselves, hoping somebody liked them. And she went, I have a baby and a husband. I have people who love me. I don't need this anymore. And she walked away. And she walked away cold.
I wonder how much of it that comes into that. Like when you say, like, I've got someone else that loves me. I don't need the love of strangers anymore. I wonder how much, like, psychologically that comes in.
It balances
to making that
the
decision.
Scales.
Yeah.
It balances the scales. If you're a 25-year-old single guy who can't get laid, hypothetically, you're traveling the country, and you have complete strangers loving you, and people buying your beer for you, and you're staying in hotels so you don't even have to make your bed in the morning. And yes, you're lonely, and yes, all that stuff, but it ain't a bad trade-off.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a 35-year-old guy and you're still working those same rooms and you don't have something to balance it out and you're not making it, that's going to play some tricks in your head too. I mean, there's a reason. I can give you a list of people that I worked with over the years who no longer walk this earth, right? Because they couldn't deal with that. One of the things that always kept me balanced is I had a pretty good head on my shoulders. I never got carried away by the good stuff, and I never got carried away by the bad stuff.
What do you attribute that to, too? Like, is
uprising.
That from how you? I was going to say, it must be
values
how you
that I was raised. if you know, Kenny and I laugh about this all the time. You know, I was a good Baptist boy, and even though I was no longer a churchgoer, I was raised to respect people, and I was raised not to get too high or too low, and I knew my worth as a human being, and I knew how to be a good human being.
Yeah.
And that kept me sane. You know, Kenny used to keep me around just for sanity points.
Is that right?
When he and Fleming and a bunch of other guys and I used to hang out, you know, his nickname for me was Small Print because I was his attorney. You know, when the boys were going to go out and do something stupid, I would sit there and go, as your attorney, I advise you not to do that.
But what's impressive is he'd listen to you. Or would he? He wouldn't listen to you?
I didn't say he listened.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're sorry.
I said he kept me around for that.
I really should have known better.
He dragged me to the dark side plenty of times. But no, I was kind of the voice. And it's funny. This sounds very self-serving, and it's not meant to, but you asked the question.
I did.
I run into people all the time from back in the day. I was talking to my buddy Lou Eisen not too long ago. And he said, you know, you gave me the greatest piece of advice I ever got. Really? Me?
Sure.
And I literally don't remember the conversation. And he treats it like it came down from Mount Sinai.
What was the advice?
We were in Ottawa, and he was middling, and I was the headliner. And he was just being a jerk to the staff.
Okay.
And they were being super nice to me. They were bringing me drink. And he goes, how come they like you better than me? I said, Lou, I'm going to give you the only piece of advice I know. Don't be an asshole. It's not that hard.
No.
It's not that difficult. No. I don't care how big. And throughout my career, I worked with people who were big stars, who were the most gracious, fabulous human beings. And I worked with guys who were either big stars or nobodies who were just jerks. Guess who you wanted to hang out with? Guess who you spread the word about? By the way, that's just life advice. That's not even stand-up advice.
No, exactly.
That's life advice. Just be a good guy. What extra effort does it take?
It blows my mind the people that need to be told that. And I agree with you. Like, that's life, not just stand-up. I found that in stand-up. I find it in acting. I find it in all facets of the business, but just in life in general, especially right now. Mm-hmm. Like, just don't be a dick, you know?
Can I tell you who I stole that from?
Who?
And I just flashed on it because it's not like I'm the first person to ever have that.
No, that was Jesus.
Brainstorm, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it was Jay Leno. He came to Vancouver. He was filming the Alan Thicke show, as you know, the comics do. They come to the comedy club. We hang out. We go out for pizza afterwards. And this is before he was TV Jay Leno, and he was just the best nightclub comic in the business.
Yeah.
And we're all sitting at this pizza joint, drinking beer and whatever. And somebody asks him for advice.
And that's what he said.
And Leno goes, you want to know the secret? When you make it, don't be an asshole. There's enough of them out there. If we stick together, we can beat them. That was his advice to, 19, 20-year-old Wayne. You know, and it doesn't matter what business you're in. It's just good advice. And it's amazing how stand-up in particular, and at the peak of the comedy boom specifically, people just got so full of themselves.
Oh, my God.
Now, maybe it was the Coke. Had a little bit.
No, you know what? The Coke maybe, but no, I think egos get away from human beings so fucking fast. It's brutal. Yeah. And I've seen it. I saw it, of course, in stand-up. How could you not? But I've seen it in every facet, everywhere. And it's amazing to me with stand-up. I always did well. I thought I was good. I wasn't great, but I was good. But people enjoyed working with me, like being with me, because I wasn't a dick. And it's the same with acting. And I found out too recently, like even with acting, you know how you go and you audition for something and you sign in, there's someone there, you sign in with them and everything else, right? What a lot of the casting agents and casting directors do now is they actually will ask the person who's taking the names, mark down who's a dick.
Yep.
Put a little symbol by their name or whatever, because we're not going to hire them. Because they just don't want to put up with the bullshit. So being my wife got 2 of the best sitcom roles of her life without auditioning,
because the person originally cast got fired. There was short notice, and they called her in without an audition to fill in because they knew her, they knew she was easy to work with, and they liked her.
This sort of like 1970s, 1980s, I'm guessing, philosophy of you got to be an asshole to get ahead. You got to be, you see a lot of movies where the people are assholes and to get ahead and things like that. It just doesn't exist anymore. The assholes don't work as much as they can. And there are stand-ups that I know now even that think, I'm going to say what I want, do what I want, and everyone can accept it. And it's like, yeah, that's hey, by all means, do and say what you want, but understand there are consequences to that. And, you can get your point across without being a dick, without being an asshole. It's possible to do,
Shocking. But to the point where one of the best-selling business books of the late 90s was written by Bob Sutton. The Stanford professor had to write a book for business people called the old no asshole rule.
Really?
And it basically said, I don't care how high performing the guy is. If he's a jerk and he's messing up your team, get rid of him.
Yeah.
But a Stanford professor had to come out and actually put that on paper for that to be a thing.
But it's astounding. Again, it's astounding that people need to be told this. This is just, I don't even think you should even have to be taught this by your parents. I think it should just be common knowledge. How you treat people with decency and respect. And does it always pan out? No. But what are you trying to accomplish exactly at that point?
Truthfully, if this
integrity.
If this COVID shutdown thing has taught me anything, it's what I already knew, which was nothing is innately known, and Darwin was an optimist.
Yeah.
What should be common sense and isn't is a frighteningly long list.
It's brutal. It's brutal. How is it for you being in Las Vegas? You're dealing with this now because it's just
there's two things, right? One is this is the Wild West, and you don't have to go very far out of civilization to find it, where I can do what I want. And nobody's going to tell me anything, and it's all a government plot. And okay, fine.
Yeah.
But the other thing is you got to remember this is an entire city based on people making bad decisions, right? If people were smart and did what was good for them, this town would not exist.
Yeah.
And so there is a higher than normal risk tolerance kind of across the population, right?
Yeah. Let's back up, though, because so you finished doing stand-up in 97. At that point, too, you had already gone to school for business and things like that?
No, hell no.
No, none of that,
I was
really?
Man, I had an associate's degree in broadcast journalism. When I got out of school, I had the choice of going to work at a radio station up in like Kamloops for minimum wage or continuing to starve doing stand-up. And I went, one of these is way more fun.
Yeah.
So I started doing stand-up and did that so now I'm in LA. I've got a wife and a baby who insists on eating, and I've got to get off the road, and I've got an 18-year hole in my resume. Okay. So I did the only thing that somebody with no resume can do, which is go sell cars. And I was a spectacular failure. But sales, they're always looking for people who can do it, and I can BS my way through. So I started figuring out, what am I trying to do, right? What am I good at? Yeah. What can I do that I don't want to wake up every morning and slice my veins?
Sure. Yeah.
And what I'm good at, and have been since I was like 6 years old, is standing and talking. Okay, let's find the Venn diagram of things you can make a living at and things where the primary skill is standing and talking.
Yeah.
And through a series of coincidences, and I mean, if we were drinking the right beverage, I could connect the dots. But through a series of supposedly back then random connections, I got sucked into the corporate training business. And I went, oh, this is something I could do. And then in 96, I got a job that I was completely unqualified for. Again, being a nice guy. I'd been going to these professional association meetings, trying to build up my skills and learn the business. And I met this guy, and he thought I was amusing, and he was a good guy, and we'd sit and make fun of everybody. But all of a sudden, he had a job open. And he came to me. And I remember sitting in his office during the interview, and he told me what the job was. And I said, whose resume have you got there? Because there is nothing on that paper that says I can do this job.
Yeah.
Now, as it turns out, managing trainers for a training company and booking comics is the exact same gig.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
It's the exact same gig. You've got to fit the right person to the gig. Some of them you could drop naked in the desert the night before and they'd showed up ready to go. Others you got to hold their hand and manage them the whole time. Some are prima donnas. Some of them are fabulous. It's terrifying what the reality was, right? It was the skill set. And, you know, part of the job was managing the trainers, which I had zero experience or business doing. And part of it was doing the training myself, which was learning the course and teaching it, which was the easy part.
Okay.
And it turned out I was pretty good at it. And that was my introduction to business. I learned by, you know, we did training for other companies. So I would go to IBM or I would go to Southern California Edison, or I'd go to these companies to teach presentation skills and other types of things. And that was my introduction to business. That's where I learned stuff and reading and taking courses and all of that good stuff. So I learned it on the ground. And towards the end of my time in LA, when the company was being bought and sold, and somebody had spotted something I'd written in a newsletter and asked if I wanted to write an article. And I said, sure, I'll write an article. And next thing I know, somebody asked me if I wanted to write a chapter in a book. And it was this giant training industry book. And I was like the only person there who didn't have a PhD. But I was like, yeah, I can write a chapter in a book, sure. And all of a sudden, I got asked to do another chapter in another book. And you know,
these are about like just about business and things
about training, about how do adults learn, what's the best way to help train something. E-learning was just coming in, and so I kind of saw that train coming, so I got real early on learning about it. And then when we moved to Chicago, which was 2001, the company moved me to Chicago for my job. I started writing a lot more just to keep my sanity because we didn't know anybody in Chicago.
Okay.
I just started doing more and more writing, and I got sucked into the professional associations, and I started speaking on the subject of management development and that kind of stuff. And that started to give me a little bit of a rep, you know, you got it by doing. It didn't matter if I didn't have a PhD. I knew how to talk. I knew how to amuse a crowd. I knew how to write a joke.
And I probably most important of all, you had the confidence to do that stuff, right? Because this is what amazes me is like it sounds like every aspect of your life, whether you're talking about being a teenager and doing stand up, right, or moving forward in your life where you're saying, okay, I got to stop doing stand up, I got to start doing something else, and I'm going to throw myself into something that I have no idea anything about. I don't know anything about business, but I'm going to learn it all and teach it, as you were saying, at the same time, sort of thing. To have the confidence in yourself to do that is it must be another upbringing thing, really, because
it is. It's a couple of things. One is it's an upbringing thing. I remember my mother, who was a Baptist Sunday school teacher and had no problem telling me when I messed up, said to me, "Remember, false modesty is a sin too." And I was like,
good
dang,
yeah,
that's a keeper.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, she thought the sun shone out of my butt, and I believed her for years.
Yeah.
I thought the woman had spectacular taste. I didn't realize she was in denial. So you have to have some degree of confidence. The other thing, and this boils down to something that not enough people in the world have, which is emotional intelligence. You know, do you, and there's all kinds of books and theories and all kinds of stuff about it, but basically it's, are you able to understand and empathize with other people so that you connect with them in a certain way? And are you understanding enough of yourself and how you work that you can adjust to circumstances accordingly? Yeah,
absolutely.
And even though I am a little bit of an emotional wreck, I generally stay pretty balanced, not too high, not too low.
What do you mean, like you're an emotional wreck? Just like daily?
Oh, everybody's a neurotic.
Commercials, that sort of thing. Yeah.
The nights I spent at blues clubs in Toronto, with half a bottle of Jack in me, complaining about the fact that the agent hates me. I possess all of that, same as everybody else does.
Yeah, yeah.
And imposter syndrome is a very real thing. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you do for a living. Imposter syndrome is a thing.
Yeah.
But, as Rudyard Kipling said, if you can, treat those two imposters just the same, the self-doubt and the self-belief, you're going to get through and be fine.
But I think that's the biggest thing is like, it's a balance, right? That's basically what it is. It's a balancing act. Because as you said, and you're right, everyone's neurotic. Everyone's got the self-doubt. Everyone's got those issues. There's not a single person in the world I know that doesn't. But it just, some people, for whatever reason, that battle for confidence, they lose it more often than they win it. And it usually, if you manage to talk to someone, and emotionally connect, as you said, to a point where they can be raw and honest about it, it all comes down to they just don't think they have any self-worth. And it seems like, again, everyone, as you said, has that battle, but some people just, they'll reach a point where they'll go, okay, now you're like talking to themselves and go, okay, now you're just being stupid.
But the big mantra that I have had most of my life is pain is inevitable, misery is optional. Bad stuff happens, and it's going to happen, and it's going to happen in big thundering herds, right? But what do you do about it? You can choose to be miserable. You can complain. You can put stuff up your nose. You can drink. You can do whatever you do. Or you can go, boy, that sucks. What's next?
Well, I mean, I end every one of these podcast episodes with life doesn't happen to you, life happens through you. And that's the point, is that, as you said, there's nothing you can do about the events that will befall you in life, good or bad. The universe has no opinion. Life has no opinion about what's happening to you.
And, I'm a lucky guy. I have a great support system. I have a great wife and a kid. I have a creative outlet for all this stuff in my brain.
Exactly.
That if I was, running a cash register every day, I probably would have snapped long ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're working in the business community and you're writing these articles now, when did it occur to you, okay, I think I want to carry this into a slightly different avenue and write fiction, historical fiction, but still fiction, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It was about 6 years ago. I had this story, famous story of it, or not a famous story, but a true story about a real life archaeologist. The character had always fascinated me. And I was coming up on my 50th birthday, and my daughter, who had just left university after the first year, kind of with her tail between her legs and going, oh, I can't do anything and life is passing me by and blah, blah, blah. And I went, well, I'm 50. What do I want to do? Just to prove to her that you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. And I got it in my head that I would try to write a novel. And a couple of things happened. One is I found a local writers group. At the time, it was the Naperville Writers Group in the suburbs of Chicago. And I started reading a lot more fiction. I actually, your homework for anybody who is still listening to this is to find the list, Esquire's list of 75 books every man should read. And I had read a fair number of them, but I worked my way through the list to try to understand what makes stories work. Why do certain books work? Why don't they?
Side note, did you agree with most of them on the list? Or did you read some and
go, most of them I agreed. Some of them I had never heard of and loved them. Some of them I wouldn't read again with your eyeballs.
Yeah.
So I decided I'd write this novel, and then I found this group of writers who not only encouraged me and said, hey, you can do this, but also I read a lot of other people's work and went, oh, I'm way better than that.
Yeah.
Which, as an artist, is not to be underestimated.
Sure.
Right? When you're doing open mics, it's easy to sit there and watch somebody kill and go, oh, geez, I could never do that. But, part of your brain is going, yeah, but at least I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got through my first novel and I found a publisher for it. And I went, that was fun. Let's do that again. Well, and then I started writing short fiction as well as practice.
So I started reading The Count of the Sarah, by the way.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
I did. Yeah. And I'm only into the second chapter because I've just started it. But it's great. I'm not saying this to blow smoke. It really is good. I'll be honest. I'm afraid to read someone else's work that I'm going to speak to because I got to be honest. I'm not going to be cruel. I'm not going to be a jerk. But if it's not my thing, but I like your writing. I really like it. It's very, it's intellectual, but it's at the same time you've got a real sort of everyday man way of speaking in your story.
Well, thank you. And the one thing I will tell you is it's a first novel.
Well, that's the point. Is like I'm like, wow, this is a first novel. This is great. And so, before we jump ahead to the works after that. First of all, like what you'd mentioned that you got kind of fascinated with this character because it's almost like and forgive me if this is the wrong thing to say, but already I'm thinking Indiana Jones style. He's got that feel, right?
It's interesting. He thought of himself as Indiana Jones.
Okay.
Byron de Prorock was for about 6 months the most famous archaeologist in the world. And he presented himself as this gentleman archaeologist who had all these fabulous adventures. And as it turns out, he's a pathological liar and a drunk. But he was this spellbinding character who had this larger-than-life reputation. And there were so many where he would go on these barnstorming lecture tours through the Midwest. And it was a comic on tour, man. Wow. It's like on stage, he was one thing. Off stage, he was something else. He was a bundle of neuroses who projected this larger than life character. I knew this guy. I mean, if I had a therapist, she would be able to tell me why I was so fascinated with people who had all the tools for success and couldn't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
I know this guy. If the road had been a little different, I could have been this guy.
Do you think being a comic like made this easier for you to write, knowing that intrinsically about the character? So that really fed into the character, eh? Because I'm not that far in the book, but that's great to know as I'm reading through it now.
As you read more about Byron, you will see the stagecraft and the things that he does, the little tricks that he does on stage.
Yeah.
They haven't changed in 100 years, right?
Wow.
So I was fascinated with Byron's story, and ultimately it's tragic and sad, but it's
like most comics.
And it's 2020. He was born in 1894. A little late to go, spoiler alert, he's dead.
Right. Yeah. He's still alive.
That probably isn't
beating the COVID.
Yeah. So Byron was this fascinating character, and that book came out and people liked it and stuff. And that was cool. And then I went, okay, what's next? So I started, I did Acra's Bastard, which I published myself and made every mistake you could make, including the name of the book.
Why is that? What was the mistakes that?
Well, I wanted to make sure, because it's basically, if you ever read Kipling's Kim, it's Kim set in the Crusades. It's about a orphan boy who gets caught up in a spy ring and in the middle of a war. Okay. And I didn't want it to be a YA book. Because even though the character is 10, I didn't want it to be a kid's book because the story is so gritty.
Okay. And
so I chose with the title to make it very clear that this is not for kids. Well, you know what else it is? Something Amazon will allow me to advertise. I violate their standards and practices with the title of the book. So I can list it. I can list it on the on Amazon, but I can't run promotions.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. And then I wrote the sequel to that, a couple of years later. It came out last year.
What was that one called?
Acra's Bastard is the first one, and then Acra's Orphans is the sequel. And then I've got the new book coming out in November, which is a completely different genre. It's not even historical fiction. And that one comes out in November, and I'm really excited because I just saw the cover literally yesterday.
Can you talk about it at all?
I can talk about it all day long. It's just, it doesn't exist. I don't know if anybody wants to hear it. It's called Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc, and it's a detective story set in Chicago, modern day, and oh, by the way, the detective is a werewolf.
Okay, the Lycan thing. I thought, okay.
So it's a completely different.
So is it what genre is it then? Is it horror? It's
I guess
comedy,
it's urban
horror?
fantasy.
Yeah.
It's kind of urban fantasy thrillerish.
Okay.
It's interesting because people see things in it that I don't see. Some people think of it. Some people are calling it horror. Some are calling it urban fantasy. And somebody who I wanted to write a back cover blurb for me, somebody whose work I really liked, said I can't recommend it because it's too dirty.
What's dirty about it?
There's a sex scene. There's a sex scene in the book.
Oh, you filthy curmudgeon.
Well, you never know what's going to trigger people.
Sure.
You never know what's going to freak people out.
Yeah.
I remember when Acra's Bastard came out, and I was looking for beta readers, and this friend of mine had a writers group on Facebook, and a bunch of their members said, "Hey, I'd love to read your book." Mm-hmm. I sent them the book, and this woman sent back this note on Facebook, like didn't come to me, didn't tell me, just posted it on Facebook saying, "How dare you subject me to this without a trigger warning?" And true, second chapter of Acra's Bastard, the kid is living in an orphanage. He's assaulted by one of the monks. Mm-hmm. That's why he gets forced out of the orphanage. That's why he's in the street, right? It's the inciting incident, as we writers like to say. And it's pretty gritty, but he escapes. And he escapes relatively unharmed.
Yeah.
But this woman said, "How dare you inflict this assault of a child? You triggered my PTSD. I may have to go back to therapy for my own assault, blah, 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 blah." And there were two things that went through my head, right? The first one was, holy cow, I didn't mean to do that. I apologize that it had that effect on you. And the second part of me went, I must have written the snot out of that scene.
Yes.
If it's good enough to trigger PTSD, I nailed it. And it's the same thing with this book. Yes, there is a sex scene in it, and it gets fairly rambunctious.
Yeah.
I don't think it's terribly graphic. It's certainly suggestive as all hell. And by the way, I wrote the snot out of it. So, if werewolves and R-rated sex don't appeal, it's not X-rated, but it's R-rated. If that doesn't appeal to you, don't buy it. Of course, now that I've just so upped the pre-sales.
Oh, totally. As soon as you talk about werewolves having sex.
Just saying.
It's, that's great. When does that come out? Do you have a date for it?
So Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc is coming out November 19th.
Okay. Awesome. Are you self-publishing? Is it
No.
You said the other one was self-published.
No.
Okay.
It's funny. I have self-published. I have gone through big publisher because this is my 12th book total.
Wow.
And I have self-published. I've gone big publishers. I've gone small publishers. And there are pluses and minuses to all of the above. I made every mistake you could make with the Acra's books, the Lucas stories. They were meant to be a trilogy. There will probably never be a trilogy because I can't lose any more money.
It's kind of interesting to me how you kind of fell into writing, it sounds like. Was it never a thing, even doing stand-up, where you were you writing short stories? Were you ever, even just as a hobby or something like that?
I wrote a couple of magazine articles and stuff. Yucks actually had a magazine called The Heckler for a brief, unglorious period of time. And I wrote a couple of episodes for that. And then towards the end of my time in Toronto, I was going to be a screenwriter. That was my ticket out because I knew I was never going to be an actor, Lord knows, because I sucked. That's just objectively true. So I wanted to be a screenwriter. And so I wrote screenplays and, took Sid Field's book like everybody else in the 80s and 90s and wrote my first screenplay. And And then when I went to LA, I've got a drawer full of spec scripts for Home Improvement and The Nanny and a show called Hearts of Fire. And Tim Conlon and I wrote a pilot. And, you know, so the goal was always, writing was always something I loved to do. And I was good at. I mean, most comics are either performers first or writers.
Yeah.
Right? They're either performance-based or they're material-based.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I was a little bit of both, which is probably why I didn't wildly succeed. I was a pretty darn good performer and a really decent writer, but, you know, close to no cigar.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you kind of had energy in both instead of...
I did. And and anybody who's successful will tell you, you have to have energy in one direction.
Yeah, yeah. I'm starting to realize that too. Like how many balls can you juggle before you start, you know, really focusing on just one.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, it sounds like you picked the right one now with writing. I mean, it definitely seems like now. Admittedly, I haven't seen your stand up. I have no doubt that I would like it, especially if Kenny was a fan of yours. I'm sure I will be.
I was the cleanest act Kenny Robinson liked.
That's great. I mean, I think like Kenny. I think the impression I always got with Kenny is like he respects you if you respect the art form. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't think he cares how dirty you are or anything like that.
Yeah, and, that's exactly right.
And so I think, you know, knowing that, I'm like, I'm going to have to find it on Amazon. You said it's on Amazon now.
It's like the last season. I want to say it's like season 22, episode whatever. Dennis Wolfberg is the host.
Okay, I'll check it out for sure. But you're writing like you seem to be. You've written so much now, and it seems like you're not going to stop. How often do you like to sit down and write? Like you said, you got a book coming out. So when will you start your next one?
Well, it's funny. And we did not plan the timing of this conversation. I'm kind of in a writer's hell zone where I've got nothing out at the moment, although I have a short story that just got accepted this morning, which is fun.
I saw that. Congratulations.
But I have two books. I've got Johnny Lycan, which is coming out in November, and I've got till the end of May to finish the final edits on that. My business partner and I also have our new business book, The Long Distance Teammate, which also has the final edits done by May or the end of May, because it comes out the beginning of January. And so I've got no new stuff that I'm working on, but I've got two deadlines that I've got to complete.
That is hell. That is hell.
So it's crazy.
Well, the worst kind of hell though is you got all that, as you just said, but do you have new ideas that you're excited to get to?
I've started on the second book. I've started on the second book in the Johnny series. It's hopefully going to be a series of books. So
sorry, I was just going to ask, because I've been there. Is that hard for you knowing I've got to focus on these two deadlines? I cannot go in this direction yet.
Oh, please.
It's
hard,
right?
I have the attention span of an Irish setter.
Yeah.
Really, really.
It's not just me.
Oh no. I'm easily distracted by shiny objects, brother. So, it's hard right now. Because part of me wants to get writing on the new project. You know, the thing about writing books is it's like you tell a joke and then you wait a year for the laugh.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously. I mean, yes, so the people in my writers group have read it, and I've had beta readers, and I know it's a good piece of work. But to put it out in the world, you want to walk up to everybody and go, "Here you go." And what do you think? And you never know.
No.
Right? No. There are hundreds of copies of my books out in the world. Some people leave reviews. That's a nice start.
Yeah.
But when you tell a joke, I mean, even on this show, I say some goofy thing and you laugh and the endorphins explode and I get instant gratification. You know, with writing, you don't get that.
No, it's the same with acting and filmmaking. Exactly what I've experienced too with directing and things like that, and just acting. You don't have a clue. I just shot something just before the pandemic. I got to be in Guillermo del Toro's new movie. And nice. I was like, yeah. And I did a scene with Bradley Cooper and Cate Blanchett. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great when it comes out. And then this happens. and it's a Netflix movie, so it's been shut down, and who the hell knows? So I've tried to put it out of my head and just say it could be 2 years before this ever sees the light of day. Who knows, right?
And of course, that's why stand-up is so addictive. It's instant it's one of the few art forms that's instant gratification.
Yes. Do you? I hate to ask, as you said, you always get this question, but now, do you miss it? Like at this point in your life,
I miss things about it. Obviously, I miss the rush.
Yeah.
Right. That rush of getting the laughs and being the center of attention in the room and all of that. Of course, I miss that.
You do.
Not enough to want to do it again, but
that's kind of what I kind of wondered. Yeah.
And I miss the camaraderie. I miss sitting on the hotel. It's like that Steve Goodman song, "We Do It for the Stories We Can Tell."
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a lifetime of stories.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier, and it's great. But I just wondered if sometimes you look at
it's a young man's game, and it's a stupid business.
Yeah,
the business model is just ridiculous, and so no, I don't really miss that.
Yeah,
but it was a great time. I remember the single greatest moment of my career was the night I shot Evening at the Improv. Not because I shot Evening at the Improv, but it was a month and a half before my daughter was born. My wife was there. I had left Canada, moved to LA, had a horrible time getting on the show. My audition was a screaming nightmare. That's a 3-beer story. But I finally got on. So Dennis Wolfberg, who I idolized, introduced me. I killed. I had the set of the night. It went great. I came off stage. Dennis is telling me I'm funny. I've got managers giving me their cards. My wife and I leave Santa Monica and we go to Dolores's coffee shop at 1 a.m. or whatever it is. She's ready to pop. We're newlywed. We've got the kid coming. My career has never been harder. This is the greatest moment of my life. That's what I miss. That moment.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's all possibilities, and it's just everything is in front of you and it's happening. That I miss. So, Well,
I'll tell you I same thing. A lot of my friends are still comics, and the ones I talk to, it sounds like stand-up misses you, man, or at least they do, right? Because everyone had nice glowing things when I said I was going to get to talk to you, and I certainly see why, for sure.
Well, hello to all of them. I mean, I miss the people. That's true.
Well, it sounds like everything's going well. I mean, you're working from home. You got few things to worry about. You got the creative juices going. Everything's coming up.
I'm a lucky man.
Yeah,
I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah, you've got a good standard.
Some days it's easier than others, but yeah.
Of course. All right, man. Well, I'm not going to keep you much longer. We've been going for a while now, but this was great. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad to finally meet you. I mean, that's been a long time coming. So
it's so nice to meet you too. I mean, I've been looking forward to it for a while now. I'm a fan of your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a great day. Bye. All right. That was my pod talk with Wayne Turmel. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you so much, Wayne, for taking the time. And you should definitely take the time to check out his books. The Count of the Sahara is the one I'm reading right now, and I love it. Actress Bastard is his second one, and then he's got the other one coming out soon, Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc. I hope I said that right. And that is about a werewolf detective. Not a detective that finds werewolves, a detective who he himself has become a werewolf. And that is really all you need for a book. It sounds like I'm mocking him. I'm not. I'm actually totally into this concept. I'm fascinated by this. Werewolves have been my favorite monster since I was a kid. And anything to do with werewolves, I'm totally in. And, admittedly, there's been some crap out there, both in movies and TV and stuff like that. But based on what I've read from Wayne so far and the way he writes, he's going to write a hell of a story about that. So check that out when it comes out. Check out his other books. You can also go to wayneturmel.com and find all of his material on there that he's written and things that he works on. He's got a blog on there, and so check that out. You can check out the website for this podcast, which is doingitpod.ca, which you probably already know because that's probably where you went to see this or hear this. You can find doing it on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. You can also email me. The address for that is doingitpod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show, what you think of the guests, what you think of the horrible lighting that I consistently use, and I will use. I will never give up on this grainy, hard to look at, harsh lighting that really just takes my face and turns it into a big, like fruit that you've never seen before. And you look and you go, oh my God. If you saw it in the store, you go, there's something wrong with that piece of fruit. Why, dear God, are they not removing this from the shelf? And now it's talking, and now it has a podcast, and people want to talk to it. Get that thing out of here. Anyway, check out all those things, and check out the website, and check out Wayne's stuff, please. And remember, until next time, life doesn't happen to you, life happens through you. Thanks so much, everybody, and stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.